Hello friends, this is Eli from Mystic Circuits, here to show you how to build the low-pass filter board. This is so far our most complicated build, so hopefully this isn't the first thing you've ever built. I would advise against it. We have several other kits that are much simpler to build, especially for your first time. So I would say try and have maybe like one or two successful builds before you tackle this one, just because it's cramped and there's some parts that you could plug in backwards and it won't work correctly. So keep that in mind before taking this on. Otherwise, if you've built modules before, this is completely doable. If you know which direction the diode goes and things like that, you won't have any problems. So we're going to go ahead and open it up. And first thing that we do with every Mystic Circuits kit is we make sure everything's there, because I build a bunch of these kits at a time, and I won't pretend that they're all perfectly done. Every once in a while you forget a piece, and so first we're going to check everything, make sure it's there, and hopefully there won't be any issues with that. So you've got your glasses, very important, but don't try and build your kit with it. It will be very confusing for you. Master level soldering. So every 0 HP module comes with a circuit board. Obviously, that's the easiest, most important piece of it to connect everything together. And then there's this acrylic backing. My last one was yellow too. Yes, the acrylic backing, that's what kind of protects the back of the board from things getting connected together. Also important, put that to the side for now. These are the standoffs which connect the circuit board and the backing. Also not necessary to have right now. You should have two different LED, or rather resistor values. They're marked on this painter's tape with Sharpie. It's a 1K. There are 4 1K resistors, and a 10K. There's only one 10K resistor. Put those to the side. We also have 2 kinds of capacitor. There's this little circular one, what we call a ceramic disc, and then there's this silly red box one, which we call a film capacitor. Both of those, the labeling of the values isn't as important because they're pretty easy to distinguish, so put those to the side. We have our 4 jacks. Every 0 HP module has 4 of these jacks, so easy enough. That'll come last. And then we've got this silver bullet sort of thing, which has all of the active electronics inside. Let me just open it up. It's got this painter's tape. You don't need the painter's tape. You go ahead and throw it away. It's fine. Alright. Now, inside of here, there are 3 parts. You have this pink wedge. It might be gray in some cases, or black. There's the white chip, the H11F1. That is the chip that does all the work for this build, basically. You have an LED, which lets you see the modulation that's going through. And then you have 2 of these diodes. I think we'll start with the diodes just because we want to have those going in the right direction. Now, if you followed me this far, I'm sure you know that diodes need to be put in the circuit board in the right direction. So if I can just focus. Focus! Okay. Wow, it really does not like that. Okay. I don't get why phones don't let you manually focus. It's clearly, sometimes, it's not looking for a face.
Okay, well, I'm going to do my best here. You can sort of tell, and if you compare the diode that you have in your case, it'll be really easy to tell. There's this orange body right here, and then there's a black line on one side. I'm so sorry. I wish that was more visible, but the black line is called the cathode. And it's very important that you line the cathode on the LED up with the cathode on the circuit board. So now you'll see, I'm sorry, this isn't an LED, it's a diode. So 1N4148 is the name of the diode that we're using, 1N4148. You can see these two footprints look different than the rest of them, and they have this line on one side. Look at that. So if you're doing things correctly, you're going to line up. Oh, I bet I can focus on the circuit board, and then the diode will also be in. There we go. Okay, so you can see the line on the diode now, and you can see that the line matches the line on the circuit board. So if you do it backwards, there's no guarantee that your module will work. In fact, it'll probably do something. It just won't be the thing that it was meant to do. So we're going to bend this diode into sort of a U shape. Again, double check that it's lining up. The black line on the diode lines up with the white line in its footprint. And then you just kind of push it down. And you bend these legs out to keep it in place. Going to do the same thing with this other diode. See, black line lines up with the black line in the circuit board, the white line in the circuit board, rather. Okay, cool. So now these legs are sitting sideways in order to sort of make it easier to solder. Nothing's moving around. Now, what do we do every time we solder something on this show? We tin the iron. And that's because I love to talk, and my iron gets real, it gets schmutz on it while I'm talking. It doesn't work right. So, again, place the soldering iron sideways against, like, the edge of the iron is touching the leg that you want to solder, not the tip. If you solder like this, you're going to get a lot of cold joints because it won't heat up the joint as effectively as if you use the side. Then you take the solder, kind of just give it a little kiss. Oh, sometimes you gotta rotate. Ooh, don't want to burn the cable. It smells real bad. All right. Sometimes you gotta untwist things. All right, I'm just making sure that this joint came out well. And if we look, since you're all hyper advanced solder humans, I'm just gonna go ahead and show this to you once, and after that you're expected to know what a good joint looks like on your own. So mix this little Hershey's Kiss, and when you wiggle this around, the solder doesn't move at all. Give it a little tug, nothing too hard, just gently pull. Looks fine, doesn't move at all. Perfect. Focus on the board. There we go. All right. Now we're going to do the same thing to all these other joints. This table is very smooth, so my board is moving around a bit. I should have gotten. I have this tool which holds the board still. Man, changed my life. I don't know why I didn't bring it. Okay, so all these joints look good. I'm going to bend these legs up in the air so that they're easy to chop off. Ha 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 ha. Diabolical laughter is of course necessary when chopping off legs. There we go. All right. Diodes look good on the other side.
let's go ahead and just do the LED and the chip right now, since this is all the stuff that you got to do right. This is the stuff that makes the build slightly more difficult. So, so we're going to do it first, just so that everything afterwards is a breeze. All right. Now,
we have this magical thing you might have heard of before. It's called an LED. God, I love this phone camera. It just always focuses exactly on the thing I want it to. So, LED. What you need to know about an LED is that there are two legs and they are not the same. This long leg right here and the short leg right there need to go in the right place, or else your build will not work at all. I promise you, if you do this backwards, your build will not work. As before, since this is also, it's just a different kind of diode, this short leg is the cathode, right? You don't need to know what that is. All you need to know is that the cathode, you see this little mark that says LED and there's a circle around it. The cathode goes to this little minus sign right here, the little line below. So you're going to see again, if you can read it, the short leg goes in the bottom hole, like so. And if you want to double check, the cathode is also marked with a little notch on the side. I know it's really hard to see here, but in person it should be much more obvious. So I'm going to do this one more time because I know one of you is going to mess this up. I'm looking at you, all right? Don't do it. It's not worth it. Okay. Short leg on the bottom to the minus sign on the bottom. So, hold on. All right. Here we go. Okay. Now that you've all done that the right way, we're going to go ahead and solder it in just to make sure that it lasts forever.
okay. Now, actually, you'll notice I didn't bend the legs directly out like this. That's because there's a bunch of these other solder holes underneath. And sometimes if you put your iron on the side here, one of these holes will fill up with solder, and then you've got to use a tool in order to get the solder out. It's not so fun. So usually I'll try and bend the legs so that there's nothing, directly next to the leg that might also get filled with solder. If it happens, it happens, but it just makes things so much easier to not have to desolder any of these. So if you don't get it, don't worry, just bend the legs in the same way that I do in this video and you'll be fine. Tin the iron. Okay, and then go sideways. Oh, kind of hold this still. All right, we're looking good. Yeah, those look like good joints. I'm gonna go ahead and pull them up so that they're easier to chop off. I just did both at once. It was a reflex. I shouldn't have done it, because just, if you haven't done this before, just don't try it. Do them one at a time. It's much easier. You can possibly like pull one of the legs out of the socket, and then that'll pull part of the circuit board off. Just do them one at a time. It was a reflex. I'll never do it again, I swear. Okay, so this is the last part that needs to go in the circuit board in a specific direction, and this is the chip. Now there are several indications of the top of the chip, but the most obvious one is this circle right here. That little circle, I know it's hard to tell, it's like a bas-relief foam. Is that the right word? It's a relief. There's a little circular indent in the plastic, and you can see the light kind of reflecting off of it. Now, that circle indicates the top of the chip,
which matches this little semicircle up here in the top of the chip right there. See that? So if you're able to read the circuit board like it's not upside down, like you can read it like this, but this is the way you read it. The circle on this chip goes to the top of that circuit board. So I'm going to put it in. Sometimes you kind of have to bend the legs together just a tiny bit. I don't know why they don't just make them the right width. You have to bend all the legs together. But you can see here the circle, that wonderful shiny little circle. It's going to the top of the board. Okay? Have you double checked that that's the direction it's going? Because again, if this part is upside down, this whole thing won't work. So hopefully, circle, top of the board. I'm sorry, I sound like a broken record. Just want to make absolutely sure you get it right.
Now, this is how I like to solder parts like this. Basically, I'll make almost like,
make sure this is in focus. There we go.
I make like this little tendril of solder that's sticking up, and that way it's kind of floating in the air, and I don't actually have to hold it. And I'll put my finger on top of the part just to make sure it's firmly seated in the board, and I can hold everything in place with one hand. I might actually go that way. Yeah. Okay, so I put my finger on the chip, right? And I'm holding it with the same hand. And that way I can take my iron. I'm going to tin it just to make sure. I can take my iron. It's almost like you have three hands if you do it like this. You just go ahead and you solder one of the corners by just holding the iron next to the pin, and then you push it into this floating little bit of solder, right? So I soldered that corner. Now I'm going to solder the opposite corner, and it doesn't matter which corners you solder, because we're gonna solder all of these pins eventually. But I like to do the corners because it's really easy to adjust if something is sticking out too far. Oh boy. All right, I think I need to do this again. Someone hasn't cleaned this iron in a long time. All right, here we go. Yeah, you kind of need a clean iron to do this correctly. Okay, so we'll reform the tendril. It's a little zigzag, so it's sticking up. And again, I put my finger on the chip. I put the iron on the pin. And I just push it into the solder. The little floating tendril of solder. And yeah, there you go. You see how it flowed on there real nice? Okay. Now, okay, there we go. All right, you can see this corner and that corner are soldered in. If we look on the other side, the chip is nice and flat against the board. You're going to want to double check that before you do the rest. And if the chip isn't in correctly, just kind of push in and solder the corner that needs to be flattened. Hope that makes sense. I think we're ready to solder the rest of the pins. Okay. All right. So, just like any other pin. Put the side of the iron on, and you push solder into the iron. There we go. Looks good. All right, cool. Hard part's over. So if that was already a lot for you, I suggest taking a break, and when you come back, the rest of it will still be here, and it'll be nice and easy. Just double checking everything that this is what your board looks like before moving along. Oh boy. There we go. Yeah, just double checking this is what your board looks like with the line matching the line on the circuit board, the circle matching the top of the board, and if you can see it, the little notch on the LED going towards the negative sign, towards the bottom of it. Okay, so now that that's all done, we're going to go ahead and put in the capacitors because they're a lot of fun. All right, so you'll see this 10NF with a little, almost like an not an oval, but like a rounded square underneath it. That's where the orange dot ceramic disc capacitor goes. So the legs should already kind of be at the width they need to be, and they go into both of the little holes that are in that rounded rectangle, right? So we've got it kind of covering the rectangle. I'm going to hold it down and bend the legs in such a way that they don't interfere with anything else, more or less. Go ahead and solder that in. Yeah. Okay. This might actually be a good example of a joint that could use some more TLC. You see how this joint is just like a big fat circle almost? It's like a blob kind of. Now, I'm pretty sure that this joint's okay, but sometimes when I see things like this, I get worried that over time it'll break loose or something like that. This joint, the solder is all kind of flowing into the board, whereas this one, it's sticking up. It's more defiant, if you will. So I'll just go ahead and put the iron next to the solder again and just kind of wait for it to melt. And you'll see when it melts completely into the board, it'll kind of like suck into the pad a little bit. And if we look again, you'll see that it makes the Hershey's Kiss shape that we are so fond of here at Mystic Circuits. Really makes us happy. Okay, so snip off the legs, doing it one at a time this time, and then we can do the other capacitor. The other capacitor sits in this part labeled B, all the way at the bottom. Now, I'm not going to get too much into this right now, but basically, when I first designed this, I wanted it to be either a low pass, band pass, or high pass filter, depending on what you put in the A and B positions. Now, the low pass turned out to be the only one that worked reliably, meaning that it never lost any volume. So the other two might still make an appearance, but basically you should know that in order to make the low pass filter, you take this capacitor right here, the big red film capacitor, you put it into the rounded rectangle next to the labeled B, right there, right above the Mystic Circuits logo. And you bend the legs over in the back. They're short, so they're slightly stubborn, but just as long as the part doesn't sit too far from the board, you should be fine. And now we're going to solder that in. All right. These legs are short, so you don't have to cut them off, but I feel like it looks nicer, so I always do. Makes it look more like the rest of the board. Yeah? Okay. Cool. Done with the capacitors. Now let's do the 10K, because there's only one of them. as you can see, make sure everything, yeah, 10K labeled with the painter's tape, 1 resistor. You just pull off the little bits of paper, the painter's tape, to expose the soft, meaty legs. And then we'll go ahead, you hold it, there's this little blob right here, the body of the resistor. You just hold that still, and you bend everything else over. So it makes a little U shape like that. That's how it's going to fit in the circuit board, right? So, bring this close. You'll notice this part right here labeled 10K, and that there's these two holes. These 2 holes, and the footprint for them is a circle with a line between them. Now the resistor footprint that I use is always the line goes between the 2 holes that the resistor is crossing, right? So in this case, the 10K is going to go between this hole with the circle around it to this other hole that's connected by the line. And usually I like to line it up so that the body of the resistor, right, because that's only on one side of this U, the body of the resistor goes in the hole that's surrounded by the circle. But if you don't do that, don't worry, it's not going to affect anything. I just like the way that it looks better, right? So you can see we've got our 10K resistor in its position, right? Now we're going to just hold it in place and bend these legs over in a way that doesn't get close to any of the other legs. And then we solder it in. Okay, just like with the other parts, we bend the legs off, bend the legs up, then we cut them off with our snippers. Okay, you are like 99% of the way there. All we got to do is solder in these resistors and the jacks, and then we'll be done. So the 1K resistors, everything left is a 1K resistor. Yeah, so we're going to pull this tape off, pull off the little bits of paper. We've got these 4 resistors. Now 3 of the resistors are real easy to find. Again, there's a circle, there's a little line connecting it, and I'll go ahead and put these in, and it'll be easy to see what comes next. Oh, yeah, one of those has some solder in it. Okay. This is a good opportunity to show you what to do. So the resistor right here, bend these legs over. It's kind of that diagonal direction avoids a lot of the other holes. Bend the legs into a U shape. Put it in this position. All right, so we have this resistor hole. It's got solder in it. Now I have several methods for getting rid of that solder. I have what is known as solder braid, which basically you just heat it up on top of the hole with your soldering iron. It sucks it out. I also have this little vacuum pump thing. You push in this back thing, you push a button, it just sucks the solder right out. You might not have those at home, so I'm going to show you what I do in a pinch in order to get the resistor in there. Basically, we've got our resistor in a little U shape, and this time I'm going to ignore the orientation because it's much easier to do if you put the long leg into this hole that's not covered up, and then the short leg is just kind of like resting in that hole. And fortunately for us, there's enough solder in there. There's not enough solder in there to make the leg not sit in the hole.
I'm sorry that that's like a quadruple negative or whatever, but basically this short leg can't go all the way through, but the long leg can, right? And so it keeps everything in position. So what I'll do is I'll press into that. I'm going to try and do this in focus. You can see that this is the hole that we need to uncover. So we're just going to go ahead and tin the iron. I need a shirt that says tin the iron. Alright, so now got just a tiny bit of solder on there to help things flow, and I'm holding this with my finger, right? This is going to burn a little bit. You have to heat up the hole while you're pushing from the other side. And yes, this metal does not only conduct electricity, but it also conducts heat. So try not to push really hard into this, or else you will burn your finger. I've kind of lost that sort of sensation in my fingers a long time ago from soldering, in my 20s, and I have old man hands already. So don't be like me, kids. Okay, so now you can see. Let's just switch up the focus every 10 seconds. How about that's what people like in videos, yeah? You can see that this hole, it already has some solder in it, but we managed to get the resistor through there. But I'm still going to resolder it just to make sure that the joint is nice. I'm going to solder the other 3 resistors in as well. All right. Cool. Okay. I guess before I cut the legs off, I'll show you where the last resistor goes. This resistor goes in a slightly different U shape. The body, I don't know if you saw what I did, but basically the body, I bend the legs next to the body on both sides, and this lets it take up sort of a wider amount of space on the circuit board. And then put the resistor in the position that's labeled with A, right? So we've got our slightly wider resistor than usual. We go ahead and put it through the little holes. Doop-a-doo. Okay. Through the holes. Sits nice and flat against the circuit board, right? In the position called A, right? So now hold that in, bend the legs over, and we solder like there's no tomorrow. Cool. All right, so we just, as usual, we bend these legs up, bend them up. They're all stand at attention, standing at attention. Then we chop them down. This is a diabolical laughter. Never knew what hit him. All right. Well, there you go. You've just finished all of the components for the filter. The only thing left is the jacks. So you're in the clear. Everything from now on out is pretty simple. So we got these jacks. The rectangle of the jack matches up with the rectangle in the white rectangle in the silk screen. And then this little side pin, you can match that up with the side hole on the silk screen as well. So we go ahead, place that there, put that there. We've got all 4 jacks in.
Let me flip it over. If you have a soldering iron that adjusts heat, the heat setting with an adjustable heat setting instead of just an on-off, go ahead and turn up your heat by like 5 or 10 degrees here, because you have to heat up a larger piece of metal. Generally takes more time. So just like with the other pins, we put our iron to the side of it to heat up along the entire side of this flat tab. And then we just touch the solder to the iron, and hopefully it fills up some stuff. And yeah. Alright, I'm just going to show you this real fast because it's a slightly different kind of joint. So you can see it still makes the little Hershey's Kiss shape, right? The swooping up on the sides. That's exactly the kind of joint we want. And it fills up the hole. That's usually a good indication that the connection is solid. And now we do the rest of them. What I like to do is solder all of the tabs that are going in one direction. Right. Okay, see, all of those were all going this way. Then I rotate the board and I do these other ones. Okay, perfect. Cool, that's the end of the soldering portion of this video. All that's left is attaching the back panel. So we've got our panel, the acrylic backing, and it has this paper on it. What you gotta do is you gotta kind of peel it from the corner real gently, and hopefully it comes off in one piece. If it doesn't, I'm terribly sorry. You're gonna have to scratch with your fingernails for a while. And now you know why I let you guys do this part. Alright, now you'll notice there's some schmutz, some little black stuff on there. You can just brush that off with your finger. Sometimes I'll use a sock in order to prevent, finger oil or scratches from happening on the acrylic. And it's also, if there's any adhesive left over on here, it can sometimes melt during the laser cutting process, and some alcohol on a tissue will take care of that. Now we have our standoffs, and I'll come in close for this. You will notice that each side of the standoff is slightly different. Hey, you look at my phone. It sure knows where I want. There we go. Focusing. Thank you, phone. Okay, so easier to see, not against a white background. This is the rigid side of the standoff. You can see those little corners kind of jutting out in a triangle shape, right? This is the soft side. Those sharp corners are not there anymore. So rigid, soft, rigid, soft. Now, the soft side of all 4 standoffs goes in the circuit board, like these.
Now we have the rigid side over there on all four. And if you do this upside down the wrong way, don't worry about it. Just flip it over. It'll be fine. Doesn't break anything if you do it the wrong way. It just sort of grips the acrylic backing more securely if you do it the right way. So you'll notice that each four corners of the acrylic has a little hole that lines up with these standoffs, right? And you can kind of tell that it's settled in there if it doesn't want to move around. So now what I like to do to mount this, because if you try and push one corner in at a time, it's more likely that you will snap the acrylic on the back. So what I do is I put my thumbs on these jacks and I use my monkey strength. Just kind of push it in there. So once again, monkey strength. Makes a real satisfying snap afterwards. And yeah, you look on the back, doesn't want to come out too easily, then you're in good shape. And yeah, here you go. If you completed this, I salute you. It's not the most complicated thing in the world, but it definitely indicates a level of skill that not everybody has to be able to successfully complete this. Now, one last thing. No matter which kind of filter you do, I usually use a Sharpie when I have a multi-purpose circuit board to just designate which kind it is. So I'll do the low pass right there, right? And then LP, right? Low pass. That means that this is one of the low pass filters. You know, it's just a cosmetic thing. If you don't like having Sharpie on your circuit board, then that's fine too. But yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot for watching. If Carly is watching, hello. I miss you too. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy your new filter. Thanks a lot. Hallelujah. And I'll see you in the next video.